early October of 2012, my husband and I had driven down to California to visit some friends. On our way home, we decided to take a different route through Oregon to go to Klamath Falls so my husband could visit some family. At some point in our trip, we misplaced our map and had an unreliable GPS, so when we hit Ashland, Oregon, my husband stepped into a gas station to ask for directions. At this point, we all knew that we were in Ashland, but had no idea how to get to where we wanted to go. It was about 7:30 p.m. The cashier at the gas station sent us down a highway called Highway 66. Later, we found this to be also commonly known as Green Springs Highway. After about 10 minutes of driving or so, we noticed there was nothing around. It was pitch black outside and the stars were very bright. We continued on for what felt like forever. It had been at least an hour. We had not seen a single vehicle, and there were no buildings or houses. I needed to go to the bathroom, so we pulled off to the side of the road. After I finished my business, my husband had the idea to lay on the hood of our truck for a few minutes and take a break to enjoy the stars. One side of the road was a straight-up cliff, the other a complete drop-off or steep hill. We were on the side of the road that had a drop-off and the cliff-like wall was on our right. My husband was on the driver's side and I was on the passenger side. We had been laying quietly for only about 5 minutes tops when, all of a sudden out of nowhere, about a foot or so from my husband's side of the truck, we heard what sounded exactly like galloping hooves. It did not sound like they were coming or going. They were just there extremely close to us. We couldn't see anything, but my husband panicked, shoved me off the hood and pushed me through the passenger's door and into the driver's seat. Once we were in, which only took us about 30 seconds, I cracked my window and used the flashlight on my keychain to look for the source of the sound. Nothing was there, but we never heard the hooves leave either. At this point, I felt so scared that I pretty much floored it out of there. I drove going about 55 miles per hour for approximately 30 minutes before pulling over to take it all in. We were sitting there in the truck on the side of the road when we began to hear a rolling and metal dinging sound from the top of our truck. We both looked at each other and touched the ceiling of the truck, and we both felt what we could easily describe as the feeling as if someone was actually on top of the truck, moving around. We hightailed it out of there and made it to a town called Keno. Once in Keno, we stopped at a second gas station, asked for directions once again, and easily found our way out to my husband's grandmother's home. The rest of our trip was unremarkable, but we both could not stop wondering what happened while we were on the Green Springs Highway. When we got home later that week, my husband was unloading the truck while I was upstairs looking out the window down at him. I then noticed scratches all over the top of our truck without explanation. I called my husband up to look at it and see if it was there before or not. When he came up to look, he was just as freaked as I was. The scratches spanned the width and length of the truck's roof and were claw-like. To this day, we have no clue what happened out there. I would love to know if anyone knows what this could have been. Everyone we have told about our experience has laughed at us or not taking us seriously, but we both would really like to know what it was. I'm a strapping young man living in British Columbia, Canada, and I would consider myself fairly normal relative to other 18-year-old boys, curious, hormonal, eager to take on my own way in the world and whatnot. Now that you have an idea of who I am, let me cleanly segue into what I came here to post. From the ages of 4 to 10, I lived in a place called Quinsam Trailer Park. I was 7 years old, laying on the top of my bunk bed. Note, I have no siblings. The first thing I remember is waking up and seeing the plastic paneled roof, the sort with seams running throughout, almost like siding. It was very late. All the lights in the house were turned off and my parents were sound asleep. I felt what only could be described as a light tugging sensation, almost an urge to look to my right. Note that my bunk bed was shoved into the corner of my room on the left with the door to the right. My door was open as usual and I started to drift back to sleep when what could only be described as a naked man-like figure made of self-contained green light walked into my doorway. It did not cast any light on the walls. In fact, it kind of looked like the dull green color you might experience by rubbing your eyes through your eyelids and then looking into a dark room. But make no mistake, that is most definitely not what I was experiencing. For something like that doesn't form perfectly the shape of a naked man without facial features, arms to the side, standing tall in my doorframe. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't calm. I was feeling the kind of serenity you only experience right before falling asleep. The being took a step into my doorway, looked up at me for a brief moment, and proceeded to turn its head down to the right to the point where it was looking straight at the air vent situated in the floor adjacent to my door. It dissolved slowly into a mist-like form and was absorbed into the vent. I did some research, and I'll debunk the idea before it starts. It wasn't sleep paralysis. I consciously moved my head to look at the doorway. Opinions. Must have been aged 4 or 5 when this happened. Occasionally, I'd wake up in the middle of the night when Mom and Dad were asleep. Sometimes I'd sneak out of the bed and walk around the house to experience the way it looked and felt with all the lights off. Loved doing this. To this day, I love turning on the lights and just hanging out in the dark. Sometimes it's scary, but mostly it's enchanting. One night, I either woke up or was awoken, not sure. I remember hearing sounds coming from down the hall as soon as I awoke. It sounded like someone was moving about in the house. Maybe it was because I could see from my doorway that all the lights were off, but I felt the noises didn't sound like Mom or Dad. My curiosity piqued instantly, and I got up to take a gander. My room was at the end of the hallway. I could see the kitchen from my doorway. Nope, nothing going on in there. Then I looked across to Mom and Dad's room. Their door was closed as normal. It wasn't them. I ventured down the hallway slowly. The seagrass matting underfoot made the moist noise when one wished to be stealthy. I quietly neared the lounge at the far end of the hallway, growing impatient with my stealthy, slow pace. Finally, at the lounge entrance, I was surprised to find the lounge room very dimly lit. It was unlike any other light source, very unique, akin to moonlight, only duller. Not a moment after taking in the lounge room in this new atmosphere did I spy a very tall, lanky stick figure of a man. I say man, but I have really no idea. All these years, I think of him as Chalkman because he reminded me of a huge chalk-drawn stick figure made of incandescent fog. Chalkman was much brighter than the rest of the room, but he was still very dim. I wasn't the least bit afraid, oddly enough. He was using one of my toys. The toy was a pen-like device which was battery-powered and paired with a book. It was an educational, interactive toy. The book had a bunch of puzzles and whatnot in it. The pen, which had colored lights on it, was placed on black panels besides the puzzle and would light up green for correct and red for wrong answers. This pen didn't write as it had no ink. Instead, there was a sensor pad at the tip. It was quite a large pen, wide black with decorative colored stripes and little green and red lights. I loved this pen and would use it like a librarian, scanning all my books and shelving them. Fun times. This pen also fascinated me as I could never figure out how it worked. I stuck that thing on every object, and it was always lit up for red, and that signified wrong. The only time it lit green was on a correct answer in its accompanying book. It seemed like Chalkman had the same idea, as he was stooped over the TV, touching the video machine with his pen. I stood in the doorway, dumbfounded. Chalkman did the same to one of the stereo speakers in the record player, or amplifier it might have been. When he got to the record amplifier area, he turned around to face me, while still stooped over. He definitely saw me, as I was still standing in the doorway befuddled. I felt self-conscious, so stepped behind the door and peeked at him. He kept on touching things with the pen. Then he came to an area I couldn't peek at comfortably from behind the door. I grew scared, as this area was closer to me, and from my angle, he would soon be out of my view, directly behind the door I was peeking from. Before this could happen, I ran back to bed and pretended to sleep in case he came in. I didn't realize until I was a teenager remembering this that Chalkman seemed to only be interested in touching electrical objects with this pen. The next morning, I headed straight to the lounge to find my pen, found it on the rocking chair, thought that was an odd place for the Chalkman to leave it, but was instantly distracted by it lighting green when I used it to touch the chair. Ever since that night, the pen would light a 50-50 mix of green and red for any object. Maybe Dad put new batteries in it before I got up and its changed functioning behavior was a coincidence. But I like to think Chalkman had something to do with it, though I haven't had a clue what. I must have been really going heavy with the pen that morning, because eventually, Dad got the book and sat me down on the floor with it. We went through the book together, but I kept touching Dad's knee with the pen, which was lighting green. I looked at Dad as if to say, "Isn't that amazing?" Dad stuffed a pen up his nose and pulled it out of his ear. This made me laugh. Later that day, it rained pretty heavy. The light outside was dark overcast mixed with glowing brightness. This is different to average overcast and brighter than a dark storm. It's such a delicate light which lit the house beautifully. I was in the lounge, still mucking about with the pen. Alone in that room, I stood watching the rain pour down outside. I thought about Chalkman, pondered telling my parents. Weighing up the options, I decided if I said anything, they'd think I was just talking nonsense. I was okay with that, but decided to keep this to myself. Looking around the room, noting how the light was, I felt all grown up in this moment for a second. For some reason, this rainstorm memory is one of the most vivid from my childhood. I remember it like it was yesterday, and like I was who I am today, having that moment of contemplation. In a way, I believe something in me clicked into place. It was very peaceful. Thank you for reading. At around 9 p.m., I was in the car with my girlfriend and my stepdad about to take her home after she had stopped over at mine during the day. On the way there, we were traveling along a main road, and all of a sudden, to the left of us appeared a large black dog with what looked to be large teeth. Its shoulders were broad and large, but its eyes did not glow. The dog walked off of someone's drive and appeared from beyond a wall. Initially, it felt like my heart dropped into my stomach, but the longer I looked at it, I just passed it off as being a normal dog. As we drove past, I looked behind, and the dog still carried on walking. There was no owner to be seen. Also, there was another car behind us. I asked my girlfriend if she had seen it, but she said no. Once we had pulled up to my girlfriend's house about 3 minutes later, my stepdad said, "Did anyone else think anything was off with that dog up the road?" And I automatically responded without hesitation. Once I got home, I undressed and got into the shower. Once I got out, I noticed a red line on the right side of my chest by my arm. It did not hurt. It was just there. I never noticed the mark before getting in the shower, so I found that this was an odd occurrence. I then began to do some research on the sighting of the black dog and found that it could be an omen towards the viewer's death or someone very close to that of the viewer. This is what got me scared and the main reason I am writing this story. Thank you for reading. If you have any input on my story, please comment because I'm very scared of this occurrence. I would also like to add that my stepdad's mother is in and out of the hospital with tests at the moment due to some complications. Has this sighting got anything to do with it? I live in a city called Bangalore in the state of Karnataka in the country of India. I'm 19, almost 20, and live with my parents in an apartment. We've lived there for the majority of our lives. Things started getting strange about a year ago. My mother, who was a highly spiritual and devout Hindu, started experiencing weird things. She began to feel presences at night. I used to sleep in my own room, but after experiencing a few strange things myself, began sleeping with my mom in her room. My mother's room has 2 single beds. Mine is right by the window and hers is near the wardrobe. The incident I'm going to write about happened about 2 weeks ago. It was late at night, about 2:50 a.m. Both my mom and I could not sleep. However, we were trying to. Suddenly, my mom let out a scream. Something had grabbed her by her hair and yanked her. She began muttering mantras out of fear. Meanwhile, I did the same while being practically frozen on my bed. We kept this up until about 3:30. That is when the wardrobe door opened and slammed shut by itself. We were both terrified and upset. None of us had ever been physically touched by this entity or spirit, or whatever the hell it is. Our neighbor, who lives opposite to us, has also been experiencing things wherein she's being physically touched by a spirit. She's always shaken awake by someone and has often felt someone touching her while she's asleep. I just want to know how to get rid of this thing. Hey guys, I'm going to make this short really quick because I don't want to take up any more of your time. Anyway, I just want to let you know that if you haven't received any of my notifications, click the notification bell and you'll get as many notifications of my videos as you desire. And please remember to share, like, comment, and subscribe for the latest of my videos. Thank you and good night.